my first big memorable trip was driving from the UK to Portugal in a Morris 1100, which you are all too young to remember, but it was a very, very old car, a bit like trying to drive across Europe in a Trabant. Trying to drive on the wrong side of the road through Spain in the middle of August with all the trucks coming the other way and all driving on the wrong side of the road as well. So I was just very glad that I managed to survive that trip. I have the task of trying to present an enormous amount of research that WYSE Travel Confederation has done in 8 minutes, which I will do because I've been warned I need to stick to time. We have research from the consumers, from the New Horizons 3 report, and there is research on the supply side from the Youth Travel Accommodation Industry Survey. If you want to hear more details about this research, then there is a couple more presentations in Hall 4 tomorrow morning. The people that we surveyed, generally in their early 20s, but the interesting thing is that the young traveller is getting older all the time. And I know this because in the hostel that I'm staying in, almost everybody at breakfast was at least as old as I am. So youth travel is not just about the young people anymore. And what we can certainly see is that the scope of youth travel is increasing all the time. People have been all around Europe already, and now they are stretching out to other areas of the world. This is partly because Europeans and Americans are becoming more adventurous and doing more long-haul travel, but it's also, of course, because there are more and more outbound travellers from places like China, for example. What we see is that the traditional style of travel is changing. So the idea that hostels are about backpackers is certainly changing. There are fewer and fewer people who label themselves as backpackers. The interesting thing is that actually it's not quite so bad as it used to be to call yourself a tourist. And we're getting an interesting growth in people using other types of labels for themselves. Young people between 20 and 25 tend to prefer hostels. As they get older, maybe they shift towards hotels, but that is the core hostel market, and in that age range, people tend to stay in hostels more than in hotels. And the hostels themselves are beginning to tap into the changing markets in youth travel and beginning to identify some of these new market segments. So in particular, we're seeing a lot of interest around this flash packer phenomenon, people who are no longer backpackers and they want to do a bit of luxurious backpacking, and this is one of the markets that the hostels are tapping into. So it's not just about backpackers in hostels anymore. Hostels have a very diverse market, and these new market segments are becoming more and more important in terms of demand. One of the interesting areas that we find from the hostels is that business travellers are more and more important in terms of the market share. So around about 14% of people staying in hostels are actually business travellers. You know, the new style of business travel is you fly EasyJet and you stay in a hostel. As a result of the increasing scope of youth travel, the increasing diversity of youth travel, there is a lot of development of new youth travel accommodation. We see a planned growth of around 12% for 2014. And most of this growth is coming from hostel operators. And if you look at where these hostel operators are planning to open up, then you see, okay, Spain is an interesting one because there is a big discussion about what a hostel is in Spain. There's been a lot of opposition from government to the idea that hostels should open up because they have an official accommodation title, hostel, so that could cause some confusion. But now the floodgates are beginning to open and more hostels are opening there. And Brazil is one of the hot destinations for the next few years because of the Olympics, the World Cup and so on. So the hostel operators are also opening up in those areas as well. In terms of accommodation spend, you can see why Australia is so keen on the youth market, because people stay a long time and they spend a lot of money. So there is an awful lot of money being spent by young people on accommodation, largely because they are on longer trips than other tourists. When it comes to selling points, why youth accommodation providers think that young people are coming to them, they say it's location. We will go and put a new hostel in Mitte and people will come to us because of where we are. And it's about customer service, it's about reputation and so on. That may be true from a supply point of view, but if you ask the consumer, the young people themselves, then they say price. That's what we want. So you may be in a nice location, but if the price is not right, you won't get the custom. So yes, reputation is important, but price is by far the most important thing that people buy on. What do they want from a website when they're looking for accommodation? What they want primarily is information about the destination. So linking into information providers is very, very important. And having a choice of different suppliers on websites is also important, which is why third-party accommodation websites are so important in the market now. The interesting thing is that when you ask people what they want from a website, links to social media are not really relevant because we will do it our own way. We don't want you to supply us with access to social media. We do that ourselves. So that's a very, very brief introduction to what's happening. But as I said, there will be more information on that research coming tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now call on stage David from WYSE? David, your most memorable experience when you traveled? When you were young?
That was probably when I was, again, a late 70s event. I was living and working in the Hotel Georges V in Paris.
Wow.
And I decided to take a weekend's trip down to Le Mans to watch the 24-hour race. So it was going on the French train system down to Le Mans, sleeping on the side of the racetrack whilst the cars ran through the night. But I'm pleased to say that the Brits came second that year in the Jaguar, so it was a good event, well worth going to.
And you met your wife there or not?
No.
Oh.
Not that one, anyway.
Dirk, Reisen. Maybe also your most memorable travel experience when you were young?
Yeah, when I was 13, I did my first... 13?
Wow, yeah.
Then I was doing a trip together with 50 or 60 other young people with the church.
With Reisen, I guess, or not?
Not at that moment. It was with the church.
Oh.
And my parents brought me to the bus, and I was gone for 3 weeks without, calling home, without any internet, which was not existing at that time anyway. And so they didn't hear anything from me, which was okay. Which is not possible anymore in the internet age. So I went there, then it was in Holland, and I had a great time with 50 other people of my age, and I made a couple of very interesting experiences there.
Can you share with us one of these experiences or no?
Playing football, for example.
Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
Then, Carl, generator, hostels, I should not say hotels, hostels. Carl, your most memorable experience?
When I was 18, I did my first Interrail trip around Europe. I had this rather crazy idea with a friend that we'd try and see as many countries as possible and cover as much track mileage as was possibly feasible. So we went from Narvik to Romania to Tangiers, all in a month for, I think, £100. And the challenge in those days, as you'll all know, was there was no internet. So whenever you got somewhere, you had to try and figure out where on earth you were going to stay. So I can remember a couple of more memorable incidents. One where I had to sleep on a park bench in Budapest until I was woken up by a policeman at 3 in the morning. Another time where we found a derelict house. Actually, it was in Narvik, which is obviously ridiculously expensive as a location. So we got into that and put our sleeping bags down for a night. And then a rather challenging moment crossing the Romanian border when it was still obviously behind the Iron Curtain, where we had smuggled in some Romanian lei in our socks and were challenged by the border guards if we were carrying any contraband. Of course, we denied it, and were able to have a very enjoyable time in Bucharest eating, well, mostly ice cream, because that was all that you could buy.
Thank you. And then Hilmar, as our last panelist. Hilmar, when you were slightly younger, your travel experience, when you were 3 or 4 or 17?
No, it was a little older.
Okay.
But my experience is quite similar to Dirk's one from Reisen. I traveled, I think I was in the age of 16. And my experience is that my parents owned a caravan, so I was used to travel all over Europe all my life, on like camping lots, camping places with that caravan, but always with my parents side by side. And then in the age of 16, I had the chance to go with Reisen, you may know that. I think it was, yeah, you know that too. I think 500 young people at my age. We went to Portugal, and it was a completely new experience. I felt liberty for the first time in my life, and it was quite amazing. And yes, I think it changed my life in a way.
Good, fantastic.
Being apart from my parents for the first time.
So let's start the more serious discussion now. David, you represent WYSE, as that's the correct pronunciation.
WYSE Travel Confederation.
Yeah, I read on your website, and I quote, "To contribute, the vision and the mission is to contribute to the personal and professional growth of students and young people and positively impact our global community by fostering international understanding, responsible international travel, culture exchange and education." That's a long mission. And
just a few things, yes.
Yeah, that's a few things. Can you give us some very concrete examples on how you, as an organization, as an association, impact youth travel, maybe from a demand side as well as from a supply side?
Well, the Confederation represents a number of different industries and a number of different sectors of the youth travel market, and there are so many different parts to it. It's difficult to sort of pick on any one area, but you know, we have, for example, we have StayWise that looks after all of the accommodation aspects of youth travel. There's another association, which is WYSE Work Abroad, that looks after everything to do with young people that are going to live and work abroad, a work exchange experience, that type of thing. There's another division that looks after au pairs. We look after insurance. There are sections that have been involved in air travel. It's literally everything that's part of the youth travel sector.
Okay. Now, I saw also something that you were talking about 10 million youth travelers in the world. That's a figure. Is that an estimation, or is that?
It is an estimation.
Because I think there's much more than that.
It's significantly more than that. It's a figure that we're in the process of reviewing at the moment. We've got a number of very large studies coming out at the moment. There's our New Horizon studies, which Greg has touched on, which are starting to sort of quantify some of the figures that are from there. But just looking at the companies that we represent, such as ISIC and Hostel World, Hosteling International, you've got STA, Kilroy. Just those alone, we would probably say that the figure's conservatively much closer to 30 million than the 10 million at the moment.
And how do you define that? Yeah, I don't want to put the young traveller in a box, but how do you define the young traveller then?
Well, the definition of young travellers is something that's subject to a lot of debate. And with the San Diego Declaration, which was done at our last World Conference, which was in San Diego last year, we've called upon the UNWTO to start to facilitate the discussions on getting a definition in place. UNWTO use up to 30 as their sort of limit of young travellers, whereas we actually take it up to 35. But we're still looking for that official definition.
And that starts with the age of 1, or?
Yeah, if you want. Okay. Yeah. But I mean, in reality, it's probably much closer to the early teens, although really we look at it probably from 17, 18 right the way through to 35.
Okay. We'll come back on it, I think, in a minute. Dirk, Reisen on your website, and I'm not going to quote it in German because then you start laughing, I think. Roof gives direction is what you say. What does it mean? Where are you leading then as Reisen?
We're doing guided tours for young people aged 10 to 25 now for about 30 years. And overall, there are more than 80,000 young people traveling with us. And as being a tour operator for this group, we have to reinvent ourselves all of the time. So there are travel concepts like hostels or hotels at beaches, wherever, which are fine for all of them. But we always have to think about new ideas and new events to attract the young people traveling with us. And looking at the past 30 years, there were, I think, 20 or 30 kind of innovations that we made, which became kind of standard now. So such as we invented, for example, the club concept and adapted it from adults to kids. That means kind of an all activity clubs for young people. The difference is that their breakfast doesn't start at 7 o'clock in the morning, starts at 11. So it better fits to young people aged 13, 7 or to 70 years old. And so we are looking at successful travel models for adults, and we try to fit them to the young people and make them there very, very much attractive.
Now, you also told me you've done a study on that, which you're going to reveal tomorrow, but can you reveal already a little bit of the main outcomes of that study?
We're doing that study every year because the mindset and the preferences of the young people do change very rapidly, especially in the internet age. That means that the conversation is totally digital now, and so we have to think about where that group may want to go tomorrow, and we have to listen very carefully. And so we do that study every year. We are asking more than 5,000 young people about their information and travel habits and how they take their travel decisions, where they want to go. What we find out, and we're asking more than 100 questions, so it's a very big study. What comes pretty clear is that travel more and more becomes a kind of a social event. It means travel becomes social. It's not more booking a hostel, going there with a friend. It's the desire of young people meeting others and sharing their ideas and interacting, communicating way before the journey starts.
Right.
That means once they book or once they think about going somewhere, at that point they want to meet via the internet other people sharing the same ideas and building groups and deciding upon a certain travel model.
The way that is done is maybe a bit new, but in fact that's the roots of hospitality. The roots of hospitality is sharing, is being together, or not?
Yeah, and but the internet, for example, offers a wide range of options how the people can come together way before the journey starts.
Right. Yeah. Now, this study, is that the same kind of study as you were doing, Horizons, or is that completely different?
It is different. So it's we only had 5,000 participants. Okay. You had, I think, 30-something thousand.
Our study is 34,000.
34,000 all over the world.
And ours is a global study, whereas yours
ours is only German.
Yeah.
And your study will be revealed tomorrow, and yours as well. Same time?
No. I think ours is first, and then yours is afterwards. I'm not sure.
I think ours is at 12:30.
Okay.
In Hall 4.1.
Okay. Go and visit them, I think, to get more information about their studies. Carl, generator, hostels. Website. Our hostels are stylish and contemporary, central, safe and affordable. Cutting-edge design creates sociable spaces. Amazing bars with vibrant atmosphere setting us apart from the competition. Okay, that last part of that sentence. How do you distinguish yourself from all the others? So what I will call the backpackers, hostels or whatever, dormitories, but also in relation to the new concepts of budget hotels, like, well, you know them, Easy Hotel, Hotel, etc.
Well, I think you've probably heard from my opening remarks about my travel experiences as a young man that one of the biggest struggles was finding somewhere nice, affordable and central to stay. And therefore, certainly that's our mindset in Generator and what we're trying to create in Generator. It's a sort of to try and reposition hostels as a very different sort of experiential environment, because that's what young people are looking for nowadays. They don't just want it on price, although we actually supported the survey that David introduced. We see value as important. The value comes in a number of different ways. It comes in some of the hard engineering you put into a building. So we put a lot of emphasis on the common spaces. So, for instance, if you come into a Generator hostel, you will typically find a very large public space with Wi-Fi, obviously, and chill-out areas, a bar, places to relax. But most importantly, a chance to interact, to be social, to have that's what the S in hostel stands for, is the social side. It's so important. And then the other thing we do is the soft engineering of our properties. We have things like event curators who actually drive activities within the hostels, because you don't want to just come and spend the night and sleep and go. You actually want to have things happening, and you want to know where things are happening if they're not happening in the hostel. So our event curators both bring events in, whether it's artists with exhibitions or DJs or up-and-coming local artists, or they actually tell you what's happening in the town around, so you're like an insider. Because I think more and more young people want to feel like they're getting to know a city in a different way. They don't want just the guidebook. They want something deeper, to feel like they're actually part of the fabric and the society in which they're visiting. So travel becomes a sort of two-way process, not just receive and go to the obvious monuments, but actually enjoy the place you're in. So Generator, I mean, we've got about 5,000 beds and 1 million stays a night. So we're getting pretty big. But the key thing is to make sure each of our locations capture some of that local flavour, that we can really, drive a lot of attraction from our customers and get a bit of loyalty in as well.
You have, I think, 8 hostels in 7 cities. Is there any evolution? So is there a big difference between the first one you established and the last one you established? Is there...
Very much so. Well, the last 2 are just about to open. We've got one in opening in Berlin, actually, in April, and another one in Barcelona in a couple of weeks' time. And they have evolved, yes. We've learned as we've gone along. We've done the research. We've figured out that people, young adults, and they are growing a little older as well. I think that was the other thing in the research. The liking of the hostel experience is not an exclusively 18 to 25 thing. People enjoy the fact that hostels give them a social space to interact. But as we've moved along, we've added innovations and features to our hostels. So, for instance, having more events happening in the hostels is definitely something that's new. Making sure the spaces are really attractive and well designed, because young people still want to stay in somewhere cool and interesting. They don't just want to stay in a place that happens to have a lot of beds. So we've invested a lot in actually making sure they're interesting spaces with lots of art and exhibitions going on. And then innovations in terms of things like we're looking at things like jukeboxes, where people can actually, from their devices, and of course everyone's traveling around with an iPad or an iPhone these days, can actually transmit the music they want to hear onto the sound systems in the hostel, so they can play some of the music they want to hear. Those are all things which make the place feel more like home rather than just a place to stay. That's very important for us.
Hilmar, you are a student of Bad Honnef Hotel School. You worked before that in a Kempinski hotel in Frankfurt, you explained to me.
That's right.
Do you still want to stay in a hostel, or do you prefer a Kempinski hotel or whatever?
Yeah, the advantage is that, I did my apprenticeship with Kempinski in Frankfurt, and the advantage is that there's some staff rates provided for members of Kempinski. So on the other hand, I had the opportunity to travel if I wanted to, all over Europe, and Kempinski has a large network right now, and comparing like different hotels to each other. So you're working at the back line, at the staff line, and suddenly you get the experience of being a guest. So you can travel. That's the first advantage. You can get to know other hotels, other cultures, and for a price that is just, on the other hand, provided by hostels. But of course, now I'm a student, and not directly, I'm still connected with Kempinski, but I plan to make a trip with my friend to Italy in summer, and probably we will be joining the General Hostels. Where they are present? In Venice? In Venice. That's okay. Kempinski is opening in Venice too, so it's competitive. But yes, of course, it's a matter for me too.
But in your studies, for example, in Bad Honnef, there's any attention to this specific segment of the tourism and hospitality industry?
Oh yes, it is. Admittedly, I'm just in second semester, so I started my studies in September. But the first class I had covering this topic was named Structures in Hospitality and Tourism. And then we talked about different stages of tourism destinations. So from the very beginning, when there are few tourism facilities provided and the connection to the local inhabitants is much deeper. And these destinations, I think, are more attractive to young travelers, since there are not all facility covering destinations. Mass tourism would normally be attending, but you can have like a very deep connection to the inhabitants because it's not that comfortable, maybe it's seeking for younger generations.
Okay.
And so this was covered, so different stages of tourism destinations, and that of course like wishes and opinions of different target groups of tourism, and that was just the beginning. But I think different topics of younger generation are more overcovered during the further studies.
Okay. I'd like to talk for a while about branding and loyalty, because I know that in the hotel business, branding and reputation is an extremely important subject, and I'm just interested to know if that the same is with the young generation of travelers. Greg, you said, I think in your presentation, that of course price is dominant, but after that comes also quality and reputation. Is that connected to loyalty? Are the young travelers loyal to a brand or to an experience they have had, or not at all?
I don't think they're as loyal to brands as we expect consumers to be. I think these days people are getting their information from a variety of sources, which is not just the commercial advertising, the branding of a company, but also talking to their friends, using information from the internet and social media. And that information, of course, is often much more up-to-date and much more relevant to travellers than information that they're getting from the commercial companies themselves. So I think the brand has an influence because people still buy particular brands, but it's much less important than it used to be in terms of purchasing decisions.
That's interesting to know, because that can have an impact on the future as well.
Sure.
How is that with you? Do you have loyalty systems in place, or do you know something about?
Generator still only has 8 hostels, so we're at an early stage in terms of loyalty programs. But picking up the point, young people are very willing to express their interest in brands. I think I read that sort of 48% of Generation Y, of people who use Facebook, list 25 brands they like. So there is the possibility to be in that like list, but you've got to think about the whole experience. It's not just a label. You can't just go out with a trade brand and say, we are X, like us. You have to make sure everything is curated around that whole experience, so that from the start, the pre-booking stage, through to the arrival, through to the stay, and the departure, you are managing that relationship. You are saying, we care about you, we're interested about you, and you'll have a good time. If you do that, then yes, I think you can get brand affinity. And obviously, my intention as a chairman of generators that people come to a city and say, where's the generator? That's what I'm looking for. So I think it is possible, but I think it's harder than just simply pumping it out in the traditional advertising and blast it out. That won't work. Today's young generation need to feel you care about them and you're talking to them at their levels and in different ways.
Mm-hmm. But in your hotel, your hostels, for example, there's a lot of repetition of guests. Do they come back or not? Or is
We
it just...
obviously, yes, we very much encourage people to come back. We get a lot of repeat business, but obviously we're growing very fast, so we are trying to encourage people also to experience the fact that we are very different from their traditional view of a hostel, and that's one of the things we have to say. You know, we're a boutique hostel with a very different mindset. We're trying to get people in their 30s or to say, come and try us and see if you like that experience.
For you, David, is there any information about the brand loyalty of...
We do have a certain amount of information about the brand loyalty, much as Greg has highlighted. But as Greg also highlighted earlier on, price currently is the main driver. Now, that becomes the primary thing. The next thing from there is that the consumer will then look for a brand that they recognise, having found the area and found the price. So, you know, brand is still important. It's still essential that you build your brand and that you become identified. And again, as Carl was saying, that identification is done at the right level. So you're speaking to your consumer in the language that they understand. But you do still have to bear in mind that the overriding driver still remains the pricing.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's interesting is that actually this is a measure of increasing professionalisation within the youth travel industry. That, you know, in the old days, you didn't know what you were going to get when you turned up in the city. These days, you can almost take it for granted that there will be a generator or some other branded accommodation that you can choose that will be in a central location, and you know what you'll get. So that really, the choice about things like location and brand and all those kind of things, people start to take those things for granted. So when we see everybody saying, oh yes, I'm choosing on price, they're choosing on price, but all the other things are almost expected. So you expect to have good quality accommodation in the right location with all the kind of things that you expect at the right price. So there's an interesting combination of those different factors.
But maybe I'm wrong, but is there not a need for a kind of a, let me call it, classification or ranking system within your business, that we know that this type of hostels or this type of accommodation providers for young people is good or is qualified, it has meets certain standards, or is that not necessary or not the...
I let the social networks, I think, talk for themselves.
Right.
I think that's really what drives it. I mean, I think the hotel industry is facing the same challenge as boutique hotels are starting to take on. They don't have swimming pools, but they want to be considered 5-star. So in the hostel space, we have to try and create and drive that same attraction. And I think young people are smarter than you even imagine, because when they look at price, they think of all the things such as, is it a central location? Am I going to get other services there? So they're looking at the total package that's on offer for what they're considering, and that really drives a lot of their decision making. So very canny customers. They know what they want, and they are very selective about how they find it.
Hilmar, are you brand loyal, or is your generation brand loyal? Do you want to speak on behalf of them or not?
I try to, yes. I guess, yeah, of course, I'm still brand loyal, but yeah, it has changed over the time, I guess, because when I'm now, so planning my trip to Italy, for example, in summer, it's more convenient to, yeah, have a look on internet reviews, and the Facebook presents, of course, and so the brand itself as an evidence for quality you get is getting more in the background, and you get friend recommendations and many reviews from many people via the internet. So I think, yeah, like brand loyalty is decreasing, or is not that important for an assurance of quality anymore.
Yeah, Dirk.
We do a lot of studies about that as well, and what we've figured out is that traditionally youth is the time of changes. So the young people, the age of 13, 14, 15, 16, are changing year by year. They're changing clothes, they're changing their point of view, they're changing their music, their preferences, and so every brand, it's not only in travel business, every brand is having a really hard time tying young people to the company and to the brand. So there is a very low brand loyalty anyway among young people because they're changing.
Yep.
And it's getting that far that if you ask somebody in the age of 16 what he or her has done the year before when he or was 15, and actually they don't want to have to do anything with this person a year before because they have entered a complete new stage of personality. So as a supplier, you need to attract these people again and again and again, year by year.
All right.
With concept very much tied to that age they're actually in. So the loyalty is very, very low.
So, in fact, what you say, it is not the person that doesn't want to be disloyal, it is just the environment that creates that he has to change, and he wants to change. Is that what you mean?
If a brand wants to be successful inside of that target group, it has to change with the customer.
Right, yeah.
But typically, brands with a very, traditional point of view are not changing.
No.
50 years ago, people said a brand has to be very solid and stable and everything, but not inside of the young target group. If you look at some brands which are kind of successful in clothes, for example, then there is, for example, there is not one logo anymore. So there are companies having 25 different logos because it's all changing with the target group.
Right, yeah. I'd like to touch on this word experience, which was already mentioned in the beginning by some of you. Maybe, Carl, you can become a little bit more specific on what creates this experience for a young traveler. So what is important for him and her to get excited to create this, what we call wow?
Well, I think when you think back on your favourite trips, what was the wow factor? It probably wasn't the sort of how soft the towel was, or the sort of
so it's not a bet,
or how you booked it. It's more to do with the sort of people you meet and the sort of conversations you have and the memories you have, and that's true for all of us when we talked about our first experiences travelling.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of create environments where those are more likely to happen. It's as simple as that, and that's why we create a large common area that people will interact with, because a lot of young people today are spending a lot of time socially interacting with people who are a long way away on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever, and sometimes missing out on the fact that it's nice to have a conversation with someone who's near you and learn other people and learn about different cultures. I mean, travel is such an important thing to drive cultural connection and sort of reconciliation, understanding, and therefore we see the hostels as providing that vehicle. So the experience comes in lots of soft things. I mean, obviously, we make sure our staff are trained to welcome, to greet, to sort of introduce, to connect people, also to inform about what's going on, what's happening, and that provides, I think, the right catalyst for that experience to happen. Then, of course, the person themselves have to do it themselves, but I think that's really what people will remember. And if they've had a great experience like that, then perhaps, if the weather wasn't great or if something went wrong, it doesn't matter. You can remember the good times all along the way.
Yeah. Does the experience and being inexpensive, does that go together, or is that a contradiction?
I think it very often does go together, because if you look at what some young travellers are doing, they're saving money on what we might term the basic elements of travel and accommodation in order to spend more money on experiences. So you will be staying in a hostel, spending $20 a night, but you'll pay a couple of $100 for a bungee jump or a whale experience or whatever it is. So I think young people place a lot of emphasis on experiences. But I think Carl is right. There's too much attention for what we might call very commercial, standardized experiences, but actually what people remember and what is valuable very often are these kind of informal, more social experiences, which have largely been ignored in certainly in academic and management studies of experience.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
We saw that last year at our conference in San Diego. We had a talk from couch surfing, and it was a very interesting discussion, because what they were saying was that they have changed social media from being purely online to being offline as well. And they described their product more as a social media product than perhaps we'd ever realised before. And they said that they particularly arranged where people were going into certain towns, cities for as part of their travel, that their social media would arrange for physical gatherings of people to perhaps meet in a bar for an early evening coffee, tea, drink, and then from there people would split off and go into other areas. So this was another layer of the experience being brought into it. So you've got the accommodation providers that are putting on certain experiences, and then the social media elements are then putting another layer of experience in as well, where you can go and meet like-minded travellers, both local and international, in that destination, and go and find new things to do as well.
And the experience, is that a planned experience or is that a surprise?
Totally ad hoc. So
totally ad hoc.
Totally ad hoc. So there would be a group of people, and it could be half a dozen to dozens, and that from there they would decide what they're going to do, depending on what the dynamic of the group was and the dynamic of the local people within the group. It may be a restaurant, it may be an attraction, it may be a club, but it would be totally dynamic and completely unplanned.
How is that within Reisen, with your clientele? Is it?
The difference is that the products we offer are group travels, but they are guided. It means they are not individuals coming together, we guide them. And so these experiences are planned for
You have a younger age group as
yes,
well, don't
we
you?
have a younger age
It's a younger age group.
The core age group is between, let's say, 14 and 18 years old. So there are groups of 20 to 30 people, and there are 2 guides, and we know exactly, how to create those experiences. And they got nothing to do, like he said, with towels or kind of touristic hardware. It's pure emotion. But if you're doing it for such a long time, you know how these experiences are created.
But I guess you also have a big responsibility towards the parents of the children. So how do you deal with that? So to balance between the experience that is desired by the traveler and the responsibility you have towards the parents?
The tour guides we have are very, very good educated. So they know exactly what they're doing, and they know exactly what's allowed in the countries they stay in, and they know all these the regular facts. They know them. But anyway, of course, there are sometimes that the young people, let's put it this way, the experience they want to make do not really fit to the expectation of the parents. So, but that's our job. So there is a kind of freedom we offer, but this freedom is pretty much controlled.
Controlled.
Yeah.
It's like in a zoo, maybe.
No, it's kind of a, we put it this way, so the tour guides are kind of a big brother or big sister, standing behind of them, observing what's going to happen, but leaving a lot of freedom and space for making the experiences.
Yeah, right. Hilmar, what is experience for you? You agree?
Of course, yeah, I do.
With the zoo or with the surprise?
Sorry?
With the zoo concept or the surprise concept?
No, with both. It depends on the age. So when I told about my experience in the age of 16, and I was just with my parents before, and then I felt freedom for the time. But now I would more appreciate spontaneous experiences, very deeply connected with the locals. And yes, I think in the age of 16, it was perfect, and I will always remember that. But now it has changed, I think.
One of the last topics I would like to elaborate on is the whole evolution of the young traveler. I heard about the backpacker and the flashpacker, and maybe there are even some other ones. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit how you see how this, because everybody is getting older, how the young traveler from 20 will evolve into the young traveler of the 30s and the 40s and whatever. Also to get a little picture, shape a little picture for the suppliers of the more luxury accommodation, what they have to bear in mind when it comes to the young traveler, what their values are, what their evolutions are. Any thoughts about that, how the backpacker evolves, or the young generation of traveler evolves? Yes?
I think you've got to remember that physically people will always get older. So we can only ever take a snapshot of the industry from an age to an age. As I said, we do around about 18 to 35. I think what the young people have to expect is that they're going to get older people coming into what they may perceive as their marketplace. So the young travellers and the young people will be there and will continue to grow. It's a very recession-proof market, as our studies have shown. But the product that we are now offering to the young people is appealing to older people as well, which is hence the flashpacker term.
What is that, a flashpacker?
It's exactly what it says. It's just somebody that wants to. It's people that actually want to stay somewhere that gives them the experience that we've been discussing. It's a different. They're able to talk to locals, but they do it. They have plenty of money. These people are able to stay in the 5-star hotels if they want to, but they don't. They choose to stay in a hostel because they want the social element. They want to spend their money more on things in the locality rather than just 200, 300 euros on the price of their accommodation. They want to put that into the locality. But the other thing I was going to say is that age is more a state of mind than it is actually a physical age. And there are plenty of people who are getting older that are still wish to experience the same things that the younger traveller wants to experience.
I talked to my son-in-law this weekend about this whole evolution, and he explained to me he stayed a few months ago in a hostel. He's 32, 33, but rented a car. Didn't, by the way, tell that to his peers, so he just rented the car because he needed some kind of luxury, but stayed in a hostel and had a dinner in a fabulous restaurant. Yeah. Is that the flashpacker?
That's pretty much the flashpacker. But if you look at it, they've simply got more money and could stay in the more traditional hotels, but they don't. They want to stay in and experience the social element of the hostel rather than the slightly bland hotel experience.
Carl?
I think we're seeing the same trend in our hostels. We're certainly seeing a lot of people in their 30s who don't want to give up the backpacking experience. And the other thing that it's sort of striking is that, they're all traveling around with sort of 500 euros worth of iPads and iPhones. Obviously, that's different from the days when we went backpacking with just 2 pairs of socks and a pair of underpants, and that was it. You see that they want security, they want safety for their valuables. That's a hygiene factor. They don't want to walk down a corridor to get to a toilet or bathroom. You have to have en suite. That's a hygiene factor. But beyond that, the real emphasis has to be on how we create interesting spaces where they can couch surf, where they can do the things they want to do. And I think we're evolving. I mean, we're growing every time we open a new hostel, we modify it a little bit because we see how quickly these people are changing in the way they interact and they behave. We're learning. And I think that's probably the message for all the people out there thinking about how hotels and other things you have to learn really fast because the consumer today changes year by year, and the main thing is this sort of experiential thing. Getting that right is the key, and I think in the future we will see all sorts of people who will alternate between a Kempinski one day and a hostel another day, and it's quite a consistent behaviour. Wow. It doesn't mean you have to go all luxury or all hostel. You will mix that, and people probably in their 40s and 50s, I think, speaking as someone myself who is in that group, will probably want to be also enjoying the hostel experience for what it gives you, because it is different. It's something that isn't classifiable in a normal scale of, basic to luxury. It falls outside of that space. It's providing a very basic human need, which is to meet other human beings.
So you would like to keep me on board as well?
I'm hoping we can welcome you to our Generator Hostels
but
in the future. Yeah, no, it's a mindset. If you've got the mindset, we have no age policy. You are welcome to come if you like the fact that it is a social space where you're encouraged, not forced, but encouraged to interact with people. That's what it's about, and we create the environment for you.
But is there not a risk that if they see me, the young generation will not come anymore?
I've been on plenty of trips, I'm sure we all have, where the leader of the group was a sort of vivacious 70-year-old who had more jokes and more stories to tell than some of the other people. It doesn't matter, it's a mindset. I think if you've got the right mindset, people have a great time. Lots of great learnings can come from people, and it's the conversations you have that makes it memorable. So that's what we're trying to create.
Dirk, yeah.
What we've seen is that there is a very strong connection between the desire of making the travel experience, is very much tied to the social factor and communication habits. That means people grew up on the internet, the digital natives, which are now, let's say, in the age range around 35 to 40 people. They grew up in the internet. They're not only changing their communication habits based on the internet option, they're also changing their travel habits. So it's very much linked. And that's why travel becomes social, because there is an age group now which are digital natives born into the internet, now connecting, using their tools and adopting it to their travel habits.
I think one of the important implications about this linkage of the desire to travel, the fact that we're virtually connected to people very distant from us, is that, as Carl has mentioned, events are becoming increasingly important as synchronizing mechanisms for people. Why should people come to Berlin now when we can stream it, and I guess this is being streamed live on the internet? Why spend money coming here to see this live? And of course, it's this social factor again, but you need the event of ITB to say, okay, on these days you will be in Berlin because everybody else that matters in your particular circle will be there as well. And this happens on a smaller scale with hostels and other forms of accommodation and tourist facilities. And so creating events and linking into events becomes a very important way of linking the physical and the virtual world and ensuring that you can capture some of that activity.
But we're also seeing that through the StayWYSE study, where hostels are reporting year-on-year growth in revenues from organising events, putting on trips, and having that as a holistic package within their property. So you can go there, and they have people there that are able to advise you on what trip to go on. So we're seeing that as growth.
It's maybe a dangerous question to you, because I fear now that you consider the regular hotel system as your competitor. But still, is it possible for you to give a certain advice to the establishment of the hotel industry when it comes to attracting and retaining the young traveler? Is that possible for you to elaborate on that? And I look to you, Carl, but maybe
I'm
also to
very
Dirk.
nervous to give advice to all the experienced hoteliers around, but I mean, the thing is, it's having that engagement, that conversation with your customers. We've seen there's some research which has been conducted, which is very important. It's changing very quickly. You really need to have that dialogue, the social dialogue, and we haven't talked enough perhaps about the social media. That's just explosive growth. That's how people are informing themselves. You're more likely to go to a place because your brother or your friend recommends it than a crowd of strangers. So how can hotels and hostels get into that conversation in a sensible way? They do it by creating events. They do it by creating an atmosphere. You can't force anything. You have to just have it ready and let people talk. And when they talk and that conversation flows, then you can start to create the environment. So for the hoteliers, I think it's about less monolithic big brands and more thinking about
segmenting your customer groups by different types of experiences you want to give them.
Yep.
We're seeing some of that already. Starwood, IHG, they're all fragmenting their main brands.
Yeah.
We're starting from the ground up with a hostel chain which we think is different, it's boutique, and it creates a really good lifestyle experience.
Hilmar, do you agree?
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have nothing to add.
Greg, any comments on that? Is there?
No, I think that's
correct.
a fairly good summary of the situation. I think the important thing when you're talking about the relationship between, for example, hotels and hostels, is that what people need to do is to stop seeing each other as competitors and start realizing that, in the current economy, co-opetition is where it's at. You compete when it's good to compete, and you cooperate when it's good to cooperate. And those things can change very, very rapidly. So, today's friend is tomorrow's enemy, and vice versa. But it's very important to reframe the whole concept of competition.
Okay, thank you very much. Dirk?
I think one thing is, traditionally as a hotel, in the bottom line, it's all about value for money. That's what the customer is doing in a relationship on. So what is the value? And traditionally, the hotel think value is sauna, wellness, spa, shoe shine machines, and whatever. That's not for the young customers anymore. It's not for value. It's a social value. And that, I think, it's a clear message to the hotels to readjust the values for their customers to the young target group.
We have 2 minutes left. We started with your most memorable travel experience when you were young. What kind of advice you could give to this audience to have in the future that same kind of memorable experience? So what should they do to plan their next travel, Greg?
Well, I think the attitude in the past was always to go to places where no one else had been, to get off the beaten track. Right. That's becoming increasingly difficult, as we've seen from the data. Everybody is going everywhere these days. So to have memorable experiences, it is, as I think the message has come across very clearly, it's about the people that you're with.
Yep.
And it's about organising the right people to be with in the right place at the right time.
David?
I think it's spontaneity. You can plan your trip. I did a road trip through North America the year before last, and we just stopped at every single thing that we saw that we thought was interesting. And sometimes it was just rubbish, and sometimes it took you through beautiful glens with tumbling waterfalls to a military cemetery. There were just so many different things, all that came from the spontaneity. Yeah. And if we're looking at the social media thing that I was talking about earlier on, where that spontaneity is there, where you can do things with other people so you get the interaction as well, I think that's the way.
Carl?
If you're under
Dirk, sorry.
If you're under 25, go to our website. If you're older, so my advice is just jump into the car, just go to the train station and just start. Don't be frightened and be open to any kind of experience.
Carl?
There's plenty of things in every city that you all know that you haven't seen, so just go off the grid a bit and look for the unusual. There's lots to be found, even in Berlin. You don't need to go that far. So just sort of put away your iPad and your iPhone for a few days and just try and talk to people, meet people, say hello, find out about them. You'll learn more about the world through other people than you will through any guidebook you'll ever read.
Hilmar, you're going to work in the hospitality industry, I think, in hostels or not?
No, for hospitality, of course.
Okay. So what's your advice?
Yeah, join the hospitality business. I have to do some advertisement for Kempinski, so it's it's very highly recommendable to join a great brand. The first advantage, you can switch places where you're living. I mean, they have a network all over the world, and so you can be employed at many places and experience there on a vacation or as an employee, and you have special rates where you can switch the hotels. So for young travelers that are not like fixed to family duties, it's a great advantage.
Thank you very much. This is a great bridge, I think, to the next session, which starts at 12:30, about the employee and working in the hospitality business. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for your wise comments and suggestions. Thank you. Thank you very much.